Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News right here on RBN Live this 9th day of April 2025. Special announcement. Stu Peters interviewed me for 20 minutes about JFK this morning. It'll be broadcast on the Stu Peters Show tonight at 6 Eastern, 5 Central. You might want to check it out. Meanwhile, Iran prepping for negotiation with the U.S., Russia, with the U.S., while Russia and China have Iran's back. I can't imagine what they'd be willing to negotiate with, Sonar 21 reports. While most of media and public attention in the West are fixated on Trump's tariff attack on the global economy, the Chinese and Iranians flew to Moscow and met with senior Russian officials. The meeting is described as expert-level consultations on the Iranian nuclear program. This is happening as the Russian legislative body approved the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty between the Russian Federation and the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was signed by the Russian and Iranian president on January 17th. I discussed in detail key provisions of that arrangement in my April 7th article. Good stuff. Meanwhile, of course, what else would you expect? Netanyahu says Iran deal won't work or would work only if nuclear facilities are blown up. I mean, this guy is such a monster. Remember, this is a peaceful nuclear energy program. Even our own intelligence community has concurred that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons and that they don't have any ambition to develop nuclear weapons. So Bibi Netanyahu wants to blow it up? Give me a break. Israeli Prime Netanyahu said Tuesday a U.S. diplomatic deal with Iran would work only if Tehran's civilian nuclear facilities are blown up under the supervision of the U.S., terms that would be a non-starter in negotiation with Tehran. We agree that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. This can be done by agreement, but only if this agreement is Libyan style. They will go in, blow up the institution, dismantle all the equipment under American supervision and carried out by America. This would be good. Netanyahu said in a video statement after meeting with President Trump, look how he puts everything on America. We're supposed to do all of Israel's dirty work. I'm getting pretty sick of it. How about you? Netanyahu's mention of Libya referred to when former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi agreed to dismantle his nuclear weapon program in 2003 and allowed inspectors to verify his progress. Only 8 years later, in 2011, Gaddafi was brutally killed in by U.S.-backed militants after a NATO airstrike hit his convoy and a U.S.-NATO bombing campaign, which was all orchestrated by Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State. It was disgusting. She boasted, we came, we saw, he died. She is the scum of the earth. Meanwhile, the Russian lower house of parliament ratifies a 20-year pact between Russia and Iran. Love it. Love it. Russia's lower house, the State Duma, today ratified a 20-year strategic partnership between Russia and Iran, Reuters reports. A strategic partnership document was signed by Russian President Putin and his Iranian counterpart, Masoud Pezeshkian, on 17 January, representing a deepening of military ties between the countries. The agreement said Russia and Iran would consult and cooperate to deal with military and security threats and take part in joint military drills on both their territories and beyond. This is a very good thing. Meanwhile, they tell you the Houthis attack ships, but they never tell you why. None of the people applauding Trump's war on Yemen because the Houthis are attacking ships will tell you why the Houthis started attacking ships. Caitlin Johnstone, very smart. None of the people applauding Trump's war will tell you why Houthis started attacking ships. The pundits won't say, and the people don't know. After 2 weeks of interacting with people who support Trump's war, I can confidently say none of them knows why the war is happening. They know it has something to do with the Houthis attacking ships in the Red Sea, but they have no idea why these attacks started happening in the first place. They generally assume it's because the Houthis are just plain evil and want to attack ships, or because Iran ordered them to do it in order to take over the Middle East. The word terrorists and pirates come up a lot. They ultimately do not know it's a blockade aimed at halting Israel's genocidal atrocities in Gaza, and that all attacks had ceased while the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was in effect. They have no idea that Ansar only announced the Red Sea blockade would resume after Trump and Netanyahu actively collaborated to sabotage the ceasefire and resume starving Gaza, or that they hadn't even resumed attacks yet when Trump began bombing them. Remember, Yemen is the only nation to have declared war on Israel. Would that every other country in the Middle East had done the same? They are displaying a form of cowardice. The Houthis are displaying great bravery, honesty, and integrity. Even the UN has confirmed the Houthi attacks are all in accordance with international law. While the attacks by the U.S. on the Houthis, I guarantee you, are not. Meanwhile, we got Colonel Wilkerson during an interview saying, think the U.S. can beat Iran? Yemen just crushed that illusion. Let's listen to a bit.
Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, and our friend Colonel Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back.
Good to be with you, Neiman.
We had a meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu in which they were talking about Gaza. And here is what Donald Trump said, Larry.
I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good.
Is the immigration, Mr. President, is the immigration plan still on the agenda?
Which immigration?
From Gaza. From Gaza.
All it is a concept that I had that I think is good, and now people are copying it. You know, maybe you want to tell people are talking about the Trump plan. Gee, why do we do that? Would you like to answer that question?
I think what the president talked about is, first of all, to give people a choice. You know, Gazans were closed in. And every other place, including in arenas of battle, I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Now, we've been talking, including over lunch, about some countries, I won't go into them right now, that are saying, you know, if Gazans want to leave, we want to take them in. And I think this is the right thing to do. If you give, you know, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it. I hope we'll have good news for you.
Larry, your take.
Well, I'd already watched that, and I found it very painful to watch. I don't know who was the most sickening. I know who was the most ignorant, Donald Trump. Netanyahu knows the real facts, so his appearance was just lying. Let's just face it for a second. This is a man who ran very, very accurately described by Gideon Levy and others from Haaretz and other places of critical thought, a concentration camp, an open-air concentration camp. Well, we know exactly why Israel turned Gaza over to the Palestinians. They were getting beat the hell out of in the place. And they felt, and rightfully so, I think, the IDF leadership in particular, that they didn't need to be in there, that they could constrain the Gazans, as it were, much easier from the outside than the inside. They didn't count on the elections. I think Bibi Netanyahu did count on the elections that put Hamas in power, because Bibi Netanyahu has been allied with Hamas ever since those elections. He's been passing money to them from Qatar and other places. He's allied with them because they are adamantly against a two-state solution, whereas, for example, the Palestinian Authority, ill-led by Mahmoud Abbas and other Palestinians, but nonetheless were for a two-state solution. So he used Hamas to fight the Palestinian Authority. And he kept them in a concentration camp. Now listen to what he said. Other people have a choice of leaving. They have a choice of leaving or die. They have a choice of leaving or have their mosque and their hospitals and their villages bombed to smithereens. They have a choice of leaving, and he compares it with Ukraine. What a joke. I mean, I had difficulty watching these two people. First of all, Trump is so ignorant of history, can't put two English sentences together to make a coherent thought. And Netanyahu's over there just nodding his head and looking like his fat, genocidal self. And this is in my Oval Office. This is in the Oval Office of the President of the United States. This is utterly disgusting. And yet, the American people seem, all 340 some odd million of them, going down every day as Trump runs his RDI flights. This is another thing, Nima. This is what this is. Misha Glenny pointed out years ago in his book, McMafia, that the number one criminal activity in the world, generating somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion every year in the black economy, was trafficking in people, mostly young boys and girls and women for prostitution and such. Trafficking in people even beat out illicit drugs and arms. That's what Donald Trump has established, a state-sponsored trafficking in people program. He is making money. The United States is going to make money off deporting all these people. They aren't going to Guantanamo, as he promised. I checked yesterday, there are about 30 people at Guantanamo. The military is not even committed to it. They're using civilian airliners. In fact, there was an expose piece yesterday also about the flight attendants on one of these civilian airliners who are really not very happy taking 200 men shackled from head to foot in their airplanes and treating them, you know, as flight attendants are supposed to treat them, and being scared livid the whole time they're on the flight, and being accompanied by a few Customs and Border Patrol armed guards and so forth, who really don't do squat for them. They're really angry about how they were promised to do one sort of air flights, and now they're doing these what I call really the equivalent of rendition, detention, interrogation flights. Only the product here is not terrorism or torture at the other end and intelligence, supposedly. The product here is money, because we're paying people like El Salvador to do this, and they're paying us back in terms of what we want from them. So,
isn't that something? Colonel Wilkerson has it exactly right. Remember Trump to talk about why Israel had given them beachfront property. How absurd. Doesn't he understand this was their land? Palestine, all of it was their land. That the Israelis are the intruders, that there was no Israel before 1948. Does he not even understand the most elementary elements of the situation here in the Middle East? I'm afraid Wilkerson's right. He's profoundly ignorant. Meanwhile, we are one flick of the infernal lighter away from global conflagration at a level of bloodshed never witnessed by anyone alive today. It's from American Thinker, an excellent publication. War is an unpleasant business. That two-word euphemism reflects the divergent experiences of two separate groups, those who profit from the violence and those who experience violence firsthand. For anyone in the latter group, war is hell. That's how Cold War General William Tecumseh Sherman described it. Civil War, General William Tecumseh Sherman described it, and he was an expert in the subject. He said everything ablaze on his marches through the South. Scorched earth conquests are meant to break the spirit of opposing soldiers and civilians alike. And Sherman broke everything in his sight. Sherman's effectiveness in demoralizing Southerners influenced military minds around the world and shifted military war planning toward tactics that would define the total wars to come. Psychological warfare, industrial espionage, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, even the targeting of non-combatants became standard practice of war in the 20th century. The First Great War introduced the lessons of trench warfare, mustard gas, mechanized weaponry, and widespread use of explosives, leaving many survivors permanently shell-shocked. Civilians face their own horrors as the slaughter of livestock and ruination of farmland spawned famine and disease far and wide. Much more good stuff. And of course, we're on the precipice now. Meanwhile, according to Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, time is coming for Russia to decide if it wants peace. How ridiculous. Secretary of State Rubio suggests the U.S. was looking for Russian President Putin to move forward with negotiation and talk with Ukraine more quickly. Speaking to reporters at NATO headquarters in Brussels, he said, what we're now not interested in, and I'm not accusing them of this, I'm just telling you, what we're not interested in is negotiations about negotiations, that we're not going to continue this forever. I think it was more an explanation of this. This is our timeline. And at some point, it'll be clear whether you want peace or you don't want peace. And that time is coming. It's pretty short. Well, remember, Zelensky has declared no territorial concessions, even though Ukraine has lost the war. It's ludicrous. Meanwhile, we have a report on how the U.S.-backed maiden coup led to the war with Ukraine, of course. And we engineered it. Bear in mind.
Simona, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us about this documentary that you took part in. You went to Ukraine, interviewed key political figures. What are you trying to accomplish with this film that has just been released?
We try to understand actually the history of Ukraine from the Declaration of Independence for the Soviet Union and make an overall assessment of the results of this independence. Was really independent or this geopolitical strategic position where the West meets the East made of it a sort of client states to leverage Russian influence on the West. This was the key question we dig into in the course of this documentary, which walks the audience through the critical and crucial events that unfortunately resulted in a war today with Russia. I didn't know, obviously, last summer that the outcome would be that tragic, but definitely help people understanding the genesis of this war. And
waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people.
multiple additional reports. For example, 30 years ago, the Kafr Quina massacre shook Israel. Today, it would just be another drop in the ocean. Get this. How naive we were back then and how sensitive. On April 18, 1996, 29 years ago, an Israeli artillery battery provided cover fire to extricate the Maglan Commando unit headed by Major Natafi Bennett from an ambush in the southern Lebanese village of Kafr Qana. 4 shells hit a UN refugee camp, killing 102 civilians, many of them children. The IDF spokesperson tried to lie and obfuscate as usual. Then PM Simone Peres said they were very sorry, but we do not apologize, and the world raged. A few days later, Israel was forced to end Operation Grapes of Wrath, another of the insane military operations undertaken in Lebanon in those years. A month later, Benjamin Netanyahu was elected to his first term as PM, in part due to Kafr Qana. How naive we were then, and how sensitive, how right. Meanwhile, Israel begins deportations to ethnically cleanse Gaza. An Israeli paper said 16 flights carrying Palestinians from Gaza had already departed from Ramon Airport, more to follow. Israel has started its plan to forcibly remove Palestinians from Gaza. This, of course, is ethnic cleansing. It's a violation of international law. With deportation flights already commencing from Ramon Airport, Israel's Interior Minister, Moshe Arbel, said on Monday. He announced more than 16 flights carrying Palestinians from Gaza had departed in what appears to be a state-backed effort to forcibly remove Palestinian residents from the besieged enclave under the guise of voluntary migration. Meanwhile, Trump tells Bibi he might not reduce tariffs on Israel. We give you $4 billion a year. Netanyahu did not get the quick or clean answer he was hoping for from President Trump in their Monday afternoon meeting in the Oval Office. Netanyahu pledged Israel will move quickly to close the trade gap and reduce trade barriers with Washington. Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same, the Israeli leader said, adding, I'm a free trade champion, and the free trade has to be fair trade. However, Trump indicated he might not reduce tariffs on Israel. We give Israel $4 billion a year, Trump said, and quipped in a troll-like manner. Congratulations, by the way. Watch the awkward scene play out as Bibi getting put in his place.
On where?
On Israeli goods, 17%.
Well, we're talking about a whole new trade. Maybe not. Maybe not. Don't forget, we help Israel a lot. You know, we give Israel $4 billion a year. That's a lot. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty good. But we give Israel billions of dollars a year. Billions.
Yep, billions. Trump does have a businessman's mind. Meanwhile, Trump dismisses bloodbath market turmoil. Market turmoil, tariff rout deepens. Listen, and there's so much about this going on here. Actually, it's YouTube.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda. The tariff rout deepens. Stocks tumble from Sydney to Mumbai, sending the Asian benchmark down more than 7%. Its biggest intraday drop in more than 16 years. US and European futures point to more falls ahead. President Trump dismisses the market slump, saying a boom is on the horizon. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent disputes the tariffs will trigger a US recession.
Lots of controversy here. Here we have U.S. markets swing wildly as tariff talk whipsaws traders. The world is different now. Market compulsions hit Wall Street. Indeed, we know it's chaotic. Frustrated world leaders wonder if Trump even wants a deal. The problem is it's unclear what exactly Trump would find acceptable or if he even wants to make a deal at all. Trump set a high bar on Sunday, telling reporters any agreements would need to eliminate bilateral trade deficits. More. Japan threatens to pull investments from U.S. over Trump tariffs. Japan is threatening to pull its investments from U.S. companies due to Trump tariff, which impose a hefty 24% on its export-dependent economy. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba expressed to Trump these new tariff policies are extremely disappointing.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Nothing you can sing that can't be sung. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
More. Could tariffs work? EU offers zero tariffs. France. World rushes to negotiating table as Trump tariffs shake global markets. Top administration officials said Sunday more than 50 countries targeted by President Trump new tariffs have reached out to begin negotiations over the sweeping import taxes that have sent financial markets reeling, raising fears of a recession and upending the global trade system. Here's another. EU seeks to ditch U.S. payment giants like Visa, PayPal, and MasterCard. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde has called for the European Union to break away from dependence on American financial platforms such as Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, even China's Alipay. She emphasized the need for Europe to establish its own financial infrastructure under full European control. Another. This may not be what they were originally anticipating, but a reset of the global economy is definitely here. Over the past few years, there's been a tremendous amount of buzz about an imminent reset of the global economy. Well, what we're currently witnessing may not look like what they were anticipating, but a reset of the global economy is definitely here. Trillions of dollars were invested to set up the global supply chains that we have today. I've always argued we should have never allowed ourselves to become so dependent on goods that are made elsewhere and make more things in this country a goal every administration should pursue, unfortunately. You can't just reverse decades of investment and construct entirely new supply chains overnight. For example, costs approximately $10 billion to build a manufacturing facility that makes computer chips, and construction time can run between 3 and 5 years. So anyone who thinks we can just hit a reset button and magically make things better is simply being naive and unrealistic. Meanwhile, top U.S. admiral at NATO removed amid Trump's growing military firings. Vice Admiral Shoshana Chatfield, a top U.S. military official at NATO, has been fired as the Trump admin continues its widespread removal of senior unified officers, according to multiple U.S. and European officials. It's unclear whether the firing originated from the Pentagon or the White House, which last week removed several national security officials, including General Timothy High, head of the NSA and Cyber Command, after President Donald Trump met with far-right activist Laura Loomer. Her name is mentioned a lot as though she were dictating policy. I find that rather strange. Meanwhile, a U.S. outpost was not given proper air defenses before a deadly attack. Army investigators report the Washington Post indicates while Ukraine was getting whatever it needed, our own troops in the Middle East were not. For 3 years, the U.S. had given Ukraine everything it needed by means of offensive and defensive weapons with its war with Russia. Critically, this has included air defense systems, much of it taken from our own national stockpiles. Now, it turns out our own troops may have been denied access to anti-drone air defense systems and more sophisticated radar detection months before a lethal attack on a small American outpost in Jordan on January 18, 2024. The drone assault, reportedly launched by the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an Iranian-backed militia group, remember how all of these militia groups are Iranian-backed, resulted in the death of 3 American Army soldiers. Why would anyone be surprised? Meanwhile, Trump threatens China with added 50% tariffs if Beijing does not drop its own levies. China, by the way, is not taking this well. U.S. President Trump warned China Monday its imports would face an additional 50% tariff, raising the total to more than 100%, unless it lifts the retaliatory levies it imposed on American goods in response to the Trump admin's heavy new duties last week. So we're really at it. Hal Turner. China retaliates again, cuts off rare earth minerals to the United States. China's retaliation against Trump tariffs include more export controls on rare earth minerals, which are vital to electronics and battery manufacturing. The Chinese government said over the weekend it'll maintain its supply of rare earths to the rest of the world, keep them stable, while limiting U.S. access to the minerals. China is a world dominant producer of rare earth minerals, accounting about 70% of the world's supply at the moment. More precisely, China supplies roughly 60% of the raw minerals, but controls almost 90% of processing and refining capacity. So they have leverage. Meanwhile, Joaquin Agopian, can the human species even be saved? You can find this on my blog at James H. Fetzer. This article comes as a postscript to an earlier piece entitled, Third World War Has Never Been Closer, exposing Madman Trump's determination to plunge us all into World War III, Armageddon. For 3 weeks straight, he'd been trying to bomb Yemen into oblivion as a prelude to taking out Iran's alleged underground nuclear facilities that his own intel chiefs claim don't exist. But today's headlines defy Orange Man's bellicose boast, reporting that Yemeni Houthis are as resilient and strong as ever after Trump just wasted $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer dollars, making the world far more dangerous by the day. Journalist Mike Whitney contends the Trump admin is demanding that Iran give up its strategic missile program as part of any nuclear deal. But Iran's ballistic missiles do not violate international law, nor is there any global treaty under which they are banned. Article 51 of the UN Charter clearly states countries have the sovereign right to develop conventional weapons for self-defense, which means that Iran's missile program is perfectly legal. But of course, he's following the bidding of Bibi, who wants Iran to have nothing and Israel to have everything. Meanwhile, get this. Keystone Oil Pipeline shutdown could quickly lead to higher gasoline prices. I wasn't aware it was back in function, but apparently it has been. Bismarck, The nearly 2,700-mile Keystone Oil Pipeline was shut down Tuesday morning after it ruptured in North Dakota, halting the flow of billions of gallons of crude oil from Canada to refineries in the U.S., potentially leading to higher gasoline prices. South Bow, a liquid pipeline business that manages the pipeline, says it shut down the pipeline after Control Center leak detection system detected a pressure drop in the system. The company estimated 3,500 barrels of oil were released, said the spill was confined to an agricultural field in a rural area about 60 miles southwest of Fargo. I don't see mention here of deliberate sabotage, but it would not surprise me. Meanwhile, zero hedge. It would be easy to keep pumping up the economy, borrowing a lot of money, creating a lot of government jobs. Explain Treasury Secretary Bessent to Tucker, defending the admin's policies while describing the extent to which Biden juiced up the economy like a bodybuilder on steroids, appearing strong while destroying his internal organs. Here is the $1 trillion stealth stimulus behind Bidenomics. There was no controversy when we were doing all that, but you would have ended up in a calamity, he said, if you go back and look at the financial crisis of 2007-8. The economy looked great right up to then. You go back to the end of the dot-com bubble and the whole credit problem, fraud at Enron and other companies, the economy looked great until it didn't. Indeed. Meanwhile, Hegseth says the Pentagon will get its first trillion-dollar budget. The Pentagon is one of the best places to cut money, by the way. Their budget could be easily cut in half by my estimate, and we wouldn't suffer the consequences. Just the big military-industrial producers would lose profits. Secretary of Defense Hegseth said Monday Pentagon will soon have its first trillion-dollar budget, as though that were a good thing, despite Trump admin pledges to cut government spending. Hegseth made the announcement on X while sharing a video of Trump saying his admin approved a plan for $1 trillion military budget. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost-conscious. But the military is something we have to build, and we have to be strong, he said while hosting Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump said he was proud to say it'll be the biggest military budget we've ever done. Well, I'm not so proud about that. Meanwhile, get this, $21 trillion stolen for underground bases. Stunning. Catherine Austin Fitts lays out exactly how we got where we are now, from the missing trillions announced on 9/10/01 to how Trump's actions today are affecting our economy. She is so brilliant. I'm a huge fan. Meanwhile, Trump admin invokes visas of Mexican band that glorified a cartel leader. Is this a freedom of speech issue? In a world where so many claim freedom of expression means freedom from consequences, the Trump admin is drawing a line in the sand. Some entertainers seem to think they can celebrate, honor, and glorify violent criminals without facing repercussions. They're learning the hard way. Times have changed in America. A Mexican musical group recently discovered their admiration for one of the most violent cartel leaders in Mexico would cost them dearly. While they might have expected applause from their audience, they weren't prepared for the swift response that would follow from north of the border. The message from the Trump admin couldn't be clearer. If you publicly honor terrorists and drug lords, don't expect a welcome mat at America's doorstep. I, for one, am thrilled to see some common sense returning to our immigration policies. But remember, they regard the Hamas as terrorists. And yet I support Hamas. Am I therefore supporting terrorists? No, I am not. I am supporting a valiant group of fighters who are fighting to protect the Palestinians from the onslaught posed by the Israelis, which is totally illegal, genocidal, and in violation of every law the world has ever known. Meanwhile, Trump, CIA, takes a big step toward killing cartel members. Details. Trump has made stopping cartels based in Mexico from poisoning Americans a top priority of his second advent. Something must be done to stop the carnage, chaos, and pain. And Trump, the government, and military have taken a variety of actions. Heavy weapons moved to the border, unprecedented spy flights, Reaper drones flying in Mexico, 7 special forces training in Mexico, declaring cartels foreign terrorist organization. Defense Secretary Hegseth declaring all options on the table, drug cartels going into hiding ahead of possible strikes. Lots going on there. I suspect I endorse most of it. Meanwhile, Politico, Trump admin, anti-Semitism crackdown mirrors Project 2025's Project Esther. Wow. Are you surprised? The Trump admin is following Project 2025, Project Esther program for cracking down on anti-Semitism to a T, and is working with the Zionist Organization of America to pick which universities to target. Politico reports. Bad, bad, bad. From Politico, Trump's pro-Palestinian activism crackdown closely mirrors a plan from the creators of Project 2025. Quietly unveiled last fall before the election, the Heritage Foundation Project Esther offered a roadmap for deploying anti-terror, hate speech, and immigration law to exploit the vulnerabilities of what it deems to be an anti-Semitic and anti-American pro-Palestinian movement. How is being pro-Palestinian being anti-America? That's ludicrous. It's a playbook the White House appears to be following, and it pulls university funding and strips students and professors of legal status, an effort that has launched the administrative aggressive immigration crackdown into more controversial, politically dicier territory. People involved with Project Esther are close allies of President Donald Trump. Some now have roles in the admin. And according to a political analysis of the 33-page document, of the 47 points it lays out, the Trump admin and its allies in Congress have already moved in their rhetoric or policy to make at least 27 reality. These include calls to deport pro-Palestinian activists who are in the country legally, revoke the visas of international students and faculty who have supported pro-Palestinian causes, defund organizations that aid them, and discredit the broader movement by branding its backers as supporters of Hamas. As we were watching our campuses burn, as we were watching Jewish students that were locking themselves inside their room because they were afraid to leave, I don't believe any of that. Trump made promises to our community, said Ryan Leib, a member of the task force behind Project Esther. Here we are in April, and promises made and promises kept. I don't like any of this.
You know I need someone help. When I was younger, so much younger than today. When I was younger, so much younger than today. I never needed anybody's help in any way. Now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and open up the doors. Help me if you can.
Like yesterday, I encountered for the first time a movement against artificial intelligence called Pause AI. They seem to have some apprehensions about what's going on. I'm a bit surprised and a little bit taken aback. I'm just starting to wrap my mind around it. But they seem to think that AI poses a great threat to humanity. I am not at all convinced. They want to have treaties, for example, set up an international AI safety agency similar to the International Atomic Energy Agency, responsible for granting approval for deployments, including red teaming, model evaluation, granting approval for new training runs of AI models above a certain size, periodic meetings to discuss progress of AI safety research, only allow training of general AI systems if their safety can be guaranteed. Now, what exactly do they mean by safety being guaranteed? I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to come back about this. They are very, very concerned. Here's a long-term policy statement. At the time of writing, a GPT-3 size model costs millions of bucks, makes it very difficult to train such models, easier to enforce the control of training using GPU tracking. However, the cost of training a model is decreasing exponentially. There'll come a point where potentially super intelligent AI models can be trained for a few $1,000s or less, perhaps even on consumer hardware. We need to prepare for this. We should consider the following policies, and they're talking about ways of restricting AI. I've added links to a couple other stories, one on the biology of a large language model, and the other, AI is becoming more persuasive than humans. My initial reaction was AI is a tool. It's an instrument. It can be used for good or for ill. But, for example, there's a very nice psychological counseling program modeled after Carl Rogers, who's a well-known psychotherapist. And the patients actually like this Rogerian AI interaction. They can have conversations because they're not worried about being judged for their moral or ethical lapses, sexual indiscretions, and the like, because it's not another person. So there's an example of something I think is highly successful. You can use AI to have tutorials in all sorts of subjects. I mean, a great boon for education, in my opinion. They are worried at the way in which robots in AI system may potentially threaten some take over the world. And frankly, I mean, I'm just fascinated by this. I was unaware of this movement until yesterday, but I'm going to dig into it. And I just want to let you know it's out there and kind of fascinating. Even though these things can't think, they are being presumed to be a threat.